What began as whispers of locker room tension has evolved into a full-scale power struggle, one involving billion-dollar interests, family legacy, and the most talked-about athlete in women's sports. Caitlin Clark didn't just bring her game to Indiana. She brought an empire. Ticket sales, TV ratings, sponsorships, everything skyrocketed the moment she put on that Fever jersey. But somewhere between the hype and the hardwood, the machine began to falter, and now, all signs point to a clash between head coach Stephanie White and the Simon family, the billionaire owners of the franchise. When Caitlin Clark was drafted, it wasn't just a pick, it was a revolution. She was a phenom straight out of Iowa, a walking highlight reel, the kind of player who could transform an entire league overnight. Indiana went from empty seats to sold-out crowds. The WNBA became must-see TV. But success brings expectations, and with it, pressure. For Stephanie White, hired to bring discipline and structure, coaching Caitlin Clark meant inheriting both the promise and the peril of her fame. Her plan was simple: run a motion offense, share the ball, keep things balanced. But there was a problem. That system took the ball out of Clark's hands. Fans noticed almost immediately. The logo threes, the fast break fireworks, the edge that made Clark so captivating, all of it began to fade. Suddenly, the Fever didn't look like a team on the rise. They looked restrained, mechanical, and lost. Behind the scenes, things were getting ugly. Rumors swirled that Stephen Simon, the son of longtime owner Herb Simon, was furious about the team's direction. He allegedly confronted key executives, accusing White of stifling the very player who had revitalized the franchise. To Stephen, this wasn't just a coaching issue, it was bad business. Caitlin wasn't merely a player, she was a brand. Every possession that minimized her brilliance meant lost revenue, lost momentum, and lost trust from fans who had waited years for hope. The breaking point. Insiders claim came in a heated closed-door meeting. Stephen Simon reportedly called in White, General Manager Kelly Krauskopf, and top executive Amber Cox, making one thing crystal clear. The future of this franchise runs through Caitlin Clark, whether the coach liked it or not. Sources say White hit the roof, furious at what she saw as interference from ownership. But Stephen stood firm, allegedly telling her, "You don't have to like it, but it's that way." After that confrontation, the tension inside the Fever organization became impossible to ignore. Staff described an eerie calm, the kind that always comes before a storm. Then came the leaks. Small podcasts and fan insiders began dropping details that seemed far too specific to dismiss as rumor. Stories about heated arguments, suppressed medical reports, and conflicting narratives around Clark's injury started circulating. One report suggested that White had downplayed Clark's pain to keep control of the lineup. Another claimed Stephen Simon had demanded transparency from the medical staff after discovering inconsistencies in her recovery timeline. Each claim blurred the line between rumor and revelation. And every time the team refused to comment, the silence only made things look worse. From the outside, Caitlin tried to stay composed, smiling in interviews, answering questions with grace, but her eyes told a different story. Her confidence looked shaken. The joy she once played with seemed dulled. On the court, she appeared hesitant, less willing to take the shots that made her a household name. Fans began connecting the dots, asking why the WNBA's biggest star suddenly looked like a role player. Online, hashtags like #DarrenFreeCaitlin and #OnLeatherPlay began trending. The same fans who once praised Stephanie White for her tactical approach now accused her of ruining the team's chemistry and destroying the league's momentum. Inside the Fever front office, the divide was widening. Some executives still supported White, arguing that Clark needed structure, not chaos. But others quietly shifted their allegiance toward Stephen Simon, believing that the organization was mishandling its most valuable asset. Reports emerged of emails going unanswered, meetings being held without White, and business strategists being pulled into basketball discussions, a sure sign that the lines between sports and corporate influence were blurring fast. For the Simon family, this wasn't just about winning games. It was about protecting an empire. The family owns both the Fever and the Indiana Pacers, and their name has long been synonymous with stability. But now that image was cracking. National outlets were beginning to pick up on the internal drama. The optics were terrible. The most hyped rookie in league history suddenly struggling under a coach accused of suppressing her talent, all while the owner's son battled to seize control of the narrative. As the pressure mounted, Stephanie White reportedly grew more defensive. Her once calm demeanor began to falter. Players described her as tense, less open to feedback, more concerned about how things looked than how they played. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's teammates found themselves caught in the middle, unsure whether to follow their coach's direction or the star player whose name now defined their careers. The locker room atmosphere grew colder by the day, and the cracks within the team's foundation were starting to show in their performances. Behind the curtain, Stephen Simon's moves became more deliberate. He began reallocating influence to executives who shared his vision, people who saw Caitlin not just as a player, but as the key to the Fever's entire future. Marketing teams were instructed to prepare for major structural changes. Even league officials were reportedly briefed on potential coaching shifts. It was no longer speculation. The Simon family was preparing to act. By now, what had started as a coaching disagreement had become a crisis of identity. The Indiana Fever were supposed to represent the rebirth of women's basketball, a story of growth, empowerment, and unstoppable momentum. Instead, they'd become the center of a scandal about control, ego, and power. Fans who once celebrated the team's rise were now demanding accountability. Sponsors were asking questions. And within Pacers Entertainment, the parent company, executives feared the fallout could damage not just the Fever's image, but the Simon brand itself. As weeks passed, Stephanie White began to fade from the spotlight. Her interviews grew shorter, her public appearances less frequent. Rumors of her possible dismissal filled sports talk shows and social media threads. Insiders claimed that Stephen Simon had begun bypassing her entirely, making direct calls to WNBA officials and marketing partners. For a family known for loyalty and patience, this was a major shift, one that made it clear a storm was about to break. Through it all, Caitlin Clark remained the silent center of chaos. Every camera lens focused on her. Every post-game comment dissected her mood. Every missed shot became symbolic of something bigger. A young woman caught between corporate power and coaching control. For the first time in her career, she wasn't just fighting defenses on the court. She was caught in a political war she never asked for. So what do you think, fans? Has Stephanie White lost control of the locker room? Or is this just another case of corporate meddling gone too far? Is Caitlin Clark being protected, or is she being silenced for the sake of someone else's pride? Let me know your thoughts below. And if you love deep dives into sports drama, power plays, and the untold stories behind the headlines, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update on the storm brewing inside the Indiana Fever.